Okay, we are looking at the Battle of Little Bighorn, Volume 3 in the Indian Wars of the American West by Michael Taylor. For those of you who watch my videos, we've already looked at Adobe Walls and Rosebud Creek. So, though this is Volume 3, it actually was the first in the series. It came out years ago in a non-box version. So we're going to look at this new game, redone, and look at the pieces, the map, look at some of the charts, tell you a little bit about what this game is all about. Okay, we'll take an overview of the map. Now it's a two-map game, but to play the Little Bighorn campaign proper, just the battle, you do not need the second map. So that's map number 1. You see the Indian village there and some of Custer's men to the right. We'll be taking a closer look in a moment. But you can see this is quite a big game when you put the extension on. You'll need a long, skinny table to hold this thing. That's for when you're playing the campaign, Gibbon's column coming in, and other variants. But like I said, if you're pressed for space, you can play the Little Bighorn game just on this one map. Let's take a closer look. Now, the Battle of Little Bighorn is one of the most written about battles in American history. It only equals Gettysburg in the volume of literature available. And of course, Hollywood has had a field day with this topic, with many movies on General Custer. And every couple of years, a new book on Custer or the Little Bighorn comes out. So this is a much written about topic. And there's been several games on Little Bighorn. There was the Battle Line edition back in the 70s, which I thought was a very worthy effort. But I think Michael's game here is the logical replacement for that game. This is the best game, I think, on the Battle of Little Bighorn. Let's take a closer look. Okay, there we have the Indian villages, and they are named by tribe. And each one of these hexes has actually 3 counters in it. There's the village itself, the Hunkpapa, the villagers, and then we have some warriors, which are dismounted at the beginning of the scenario. So there's the village, unalerted to Custer's presence. And over to the west is the pony herds for the village. Also, the Indian player gets to pick 2 forward counters, and he places them like so with the question mark up, so Custer does not know which is the real forward. In this case, they're both forwards. Now I better check that myself. Maybe I'm missing a counter. Custer's men come in from the south. The game starts off historically the way Custer came in. Him with several companies, that's Custer's command, Captain Keogh's command, and Reno will come in a little bit later from this other side of the river. We'll actually cross the river here. Reno's crossing. And coming up the rear will be Benteen and the pack train. So the game starts with the forces historically divided. Now, in game terms, a player may want to unite these forces, because half the reason Custer lost the battle was because he was severely outnumbered and because he did divide his forces. And you've got the named positions that became famous later on: Reno's Hill, the Sharpshooter Ridge, Weir Point, and Medicine Tail Coulee. Now, historically, from what we know, Custer's column crossed this area here, went down Medicine Tail Coulee, and the Indians counterattacked here, and the last stand was in this vicinity, Custer Hill and Calhoun Hill. Reno came across the ford here and charged the Indian village here, and was driven back to the heights and across the river, and was besieged for a day or so at Reno Hill. That's historically how the campaign went. Of course, in your game, it doesn't have to go that way. Let's take a closer look at these beautiful counters. As I demonstrated in the other videos, the counters are very well done indeed. There we have Company F of the 7th Cavalry, Lieutenant Riley. That's its combat factor, that's its movement, and of course the reverse side shows the unit dismounted. And you get pony or horse holders and the horses when you do dismount. There's Captain Yates, General Custer, of course, and there's the 7th Cavalry headquarters. And those are the Crow Scouts. The Indian units are similar, very well done. Each tribe has its own distinctive little shield, which is kind of neat. That's your combat factor, because there's a yellow box around it. Means that Turning Bear has a Henry rifles with him. And notice the movement factor of 7. Well, the cavalry is only 6. Only 1 point movement difference, but can make a heck of a difference. Flip side, of course, is the unit, again, dismounted, still showing the movement factor, and still showing that it's armed with Henry rifles. And the Indian villages, each of them named. There's the Yanktane, there's Iron Bear, dismounted, and the Yanktane villagers. Now, you're allowed some leeway in this setup, so this is just a particular setup, not the exact one. You have a bit of variability for these 2 warriors over there. You can pick up 2 warriors and have them on the other side. There is historical evidence that there were warriors on the other side of the river that day, and did in fact cite Custer's column. And, well, Reno and the rest of the units are all the same. And that's about it for showing the board and the counters. Now, the charts are very good. Game turn track there. And because there's so many units for stacking and stuff, you get off-board charts, which I'll show you. Now, if your stacks get a bit unwieldy, you can use these off-map holding boxes, one for the cavalry and one for the Indians. And of course you get a host of number markers. And there's an optional rule for ammunition. I haven't played it with the advanced ammunition. I'm not sure if I want to bother with the record keeping. I like the randomness of running out of ammunition. Soldiers sometimes tended to just waste their ammunition, shoot it off in a very short time. Other veteran soldiers tend to conserve it. And so I'm not sure if ticking off individual ammunitions is the way I want to go. And for this game, you should, I put trays to it because you want to do a kind of a fine sort, so you don't have to scramble all over the place for counters. And I also have to place the Indian leaders too on the board. So what I'm going to do is just play a turn or two just to give you an idea of what the game's all about. I will not complete the whole battle. That would take probably several hours. But just to give you an idea of what the game's all about. It's a very, very fine game indeed, and looks just terrific. So let's start with turn 1 and do a couple of turns, see how it plays out. Okay, for the purposes of the video, I've only used the 1 map. I've taken off the extra sheet and shrunk the table down so I can put my charts there, and we'll just play on the 1 map. So let's begin with turn 1. Now, one of the prime decisions the cavalry player will have to make is whether he's going to try to correct the deficiencies of Custer's strategy. As I mentioned, Custer's column already starts split up. Do you want to correct that? Now, when I play a game for the first time, or if I shoot a video of it, I often try to emulate the historical move. In other words, move like Custer did, kind of move like Reno did, and see if the game is capable of reproducing the historical result. Well, I have no doubt that the game is capable of doing that, so I don't think I'd learn a lot by doing that. So for this game, I'm not going to necessarily emulate Custer's exact move, nor Reno's. And we'll just see where it goes. I don't know whether this is going to work or not, but that's what I'm going to do in the video. Now, I should point out that turn 1, the cavalry does move first, coming on the board as I mentioned here. But all the Indian units, the villages, are frozen. They cannot move, nor can those Indian units I've put across the river. The only unit that can move is this one called Turning Bear. And there's various mechanisms whereby the village can be woken up. One of them is if Turning Bear returns to the village there, enters the village, then everybody wakes up. Another way is if a cavalry unit comes within 5 hexes of a villager unit, and then they wake up. And so there's various ways the villages can be alerted. I'm going to play it kind of what I'll call it scientifically, as if 2 players were playing it and they don't care about history and they want to win the game. How do you win the game? Well, you destroy units mainly, and you get victory points that way. So I'll play it maybe conservative for the cavalry, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, Custer's column is going to play conservatively. He's going to try to reunite with Keogh. So I had Custer move in and Keogh move to the west. Reno needed to know whether this is a real ford or not, so he crossed the ford, flipped the counter to find out, yes, it is a ford, and then he's going to march back probably and join Custer. So that's turn one for the cavalry. Not much happened. And of course, Turning Bear here is the only one that can move. So in the Indian turn, he'll probably march back and try to wake up that village. I don't see any problem there. I think that's the common sense move for Turning Bear. There's no point him trying to delay Reno's column. Reno's column is still heavy enough to outnumber him heavily. Why have a unit destroyed for nothing? So his job is to go alert the village, and that's exactly what he's doing. So that's turn one on June 25th, 14:20, 2:20 in the afternoon. We'll now do the 2:40 turn, and the cavalry will move. Let's see what they can do. Okay, the cavalry moved further west. Custer's command mounted Reno Hill here and stacked to just about capacity. The stacking is 25 combat factors, so he was not able to stack with every single unit under Keogh. Keogh has the Crow Scouts and Lieutenant Porter right adjacent to him. Reno recrossed the river and went through the thickets here and is attempting to join up or at least be in the close proximity to Custer. Turning Bear, of course, will enter the village and alert at this turn. And I'll just look up the mechanics of that to see how that works. Okay, I'm going from a copy of the rules here. I wouldn't dare mess up the original rules. But there's two different mechanisms for alerting the camp. And in this case, it'll be Turning Bear that enters the Hunkpapa camp. And there are different rules depending if the U.S. unit triggers the alert or the Indian unit. In this case, because Turning Bear is alerting them, he'll enter the Hunkpapa camp. The Hunkpapa circle will be alerted, and it says that they can move on the subsequent Indian movement turn, so they won't be alerted instantly. Also keep in mind that the camp units, the warrior units in the camp unit, are all dismounted. So they're going to have to march over to the ponies here, mount up. That's going to take time. So the question is, can they get mounted and deployed in time before Custer moves in for the kill? Don't know. That's will be kind of interesting to explore in this game. Let's see what happens. Well, we'll have Turning Bear enter the camp first. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So all of the Hunkpapa camp is alerted for the second turn of the game. Now it also says that the other camp units can move half their movement allowance. So next turn the Indians will be doing a lot of movement in reaction to Custer's column. But let's move to the next turn, which is the 1500 turn, June 25th. Okay, for the 1500 turn, Custer wanted to find out whether this was a real ford or not. So he crossed, flipped the ford marker, and indeed it was a ford. And Keogh is right beside him on the other side. Reno is trying to catch up with Custer's column. Now, I did mention that the reinforcements I had to come on turn 4. You have some variability for that, so I chose to have Benteen's column come on the next turn. Now, there's also another rule for the pony herd here. When the camp wakes up, you'll be rolling a die to see how many of the pony herds here flip to become horse holders. So that'll be quite random. And that's to show you the confusion and just time wasted in getting the troops mounted. So I'll spend a few minutes to do the Indian turn here, and I'll shoot the video after the Indians have moved for 1500. Okay, the Indians didn't get a very good roll for their pony herd. They only rolled a 1, which means one single counter is going to be able to be flipped to its horse holder side. I hope I'm doing that right. The rules just say roll a die, and that's the number of units, so that's what I'm doing. So the Hunkpapa will move now, and of course they're going to make a beeline towards these horses, and the rest of the village can only move half. So we'll pick up the action after I've moved all the Indian units. Okay, this is the Indian village after the Indians have moved. Most of the Hunkpapa were able to get to the pony herd. They have to spend a movement point to mount up, and a few of them have. So you can see the Hunkpapa are on the way to mounting up and trying to react. Most of the other Indian villages, again, are still dismounted. They're scrambling towards the pony herd. Now, when you mount up, you remove, or rather flip the pony herd counter to its pony holder side, and then just set it aside to show that later on you can dismount. So we've got the Indians reacting now to Custer's move, and let's go on to the next turn. The cavalry will move, and the tail end of Custer's column will come up too. Okay, well, since Custer has found a ford here at the Little Bighorn, and he's very close to the Indian village, I don't think he's going to try anything too fancy. He's going to consolidate on this side of the river with Reno. Benteen is coming up from the rear with a couple more companies and the pack train. So we'll cross the river with Custer, consolidate with Reno, then we'll make some decisions whether he wants to charge the Indian village. He wants to keep his column as united as possible. Let's see if he can do that. Okay, that's the situation after Custer has moved with Keogh. He's moved over here to the west. Reno's coming up as fast as he can, but he didn't have enough movement points to cross the ford and enter the forest. Benteen is moving as fast as he can, coming in the north on this ridge. So it'll take a few turns for Custer to unite. By then, the Indians may be kind of stirred. Custer's in front here. He's not too worried because these Indians are still quite a piece away. There's only very few of them. So he's being a little bold here. Well, maybe not so bold. He can take on these guys. But he isn't going to be rash and charge into the village yet, I don't think. But let's see how many Indians get woken up in their turn. Okay, I made a mistake there, which I had to correct. These two units across the river here, I believe, are not alerted because they're not in the camp. They were not alerted by an Indian unit, so they won't be able to move, so I've had to fix them. However, in the Indian village front itself, the warriors are mounting up, and things are looking good for them now. We've got a bunch of dismounted Indians here. They'll be able to mount up in these pony herds, and they'll be in the battle pretty soon. The units that did mount, I've put them over here, some of them on this ridge. I think it might be a good spot. Plus, they want to be in front of the village. They don't want Custer bothering their women and children, so they are interposing between Custer and the village. So this turn, which will be the 15-20, will be interesting because we don't know whether Custer will now take the initiative and try to crash into these Indians. So we might see some action this turn. Let's see what happens. Okay, here's where we will play a little bit in character now. Custer, being the impetuous fellow that he was, would charge right in. And that's what he did. Now, because the cavalry have used their full movement allowance, they will not be able to fire in the offensive fire phase. So if you're playing with a lot of units, you can just remind yourself by putting a unit fired status on each stack. So but I'm sure we're going to remember cavalry will not be able to fire for Custer. And Reno is moving as fast as he can to join Custer, and Benteen is coming up as fast as he can. So the Indians under Iron Bear will be able to defensively fire at the Custer column. Okay, this is where the game gets a little unwieldy again, as I pointed out in the Rosebud game. You have to disassemble the stacks because the defensive fire phase, the unit can fire at any single company it wants. So we'll have Iron Bear fire at, we'll say here, Lieutenant Riley, and we'll have Inca Paduta fire at the next one, which is under Lieutenant Harrington. So the Indians will get to fire full fire, and now I misspoke. The cavalry will get to fire, but they will be firing at half. But let's do the Indian fire first. We'll have Iron Bear fire at Lieutenant Riley. We'll check the tables and roll the dice. Okay, Iron Bear is a 2, so you take the Indian unit here, 2. You slide down to his target, which is mounted, so we'll be firing on table B. And the modifiers for fire combat are, since the target is mounted, you'll be adding 1 to the dice. So the Indians will fire and roll the dice on table B, adding 1 to the dice. Okay, Iron Bear rolled a 7, which becomes an 8, which is an MC result, which is a morale check. So Lieutenant Riley will have to do a morale check table on this table here. We'll roll and see what he gets. And he rolls a 5, and I believe that's a pin. We'll just check the modifiers. Light woods, no leader modifier. Yeah, let's see, he does have Keo with him, so we'll take that into account, see what he gets. Yeah, even adding 2 for having Keo with him, he gets a disrupt result, so we mark that with a disrupted marker. Okay, so we have to mark Lieutenant Riley with a disrupted marker, and this is where the game gets a little unwieldy sometimes, when you've got to sort of juggle units within the stack. So Lieutenant Riley is disrupted. Okay, now we've got the next shot, which is Inca Paduta. He's going to be on the 3 table, firing at Lieutenant Harrington. Let's see what they get. Okay, he was on table B also, but he rolled a 6, and that's a no result. So that's the end of the Indian fire combat for that phase. Okay, we're into the advanced fire phase, and in this phase the cavalry will be able to fire, but they are firing at half value. So I'll divide these units up so that half of them are firing at Inca Paduta and half are firing at Iron Bear. And we'll do the die roll results for each of those combats. Okay, I can see I missed one critical modifier, which I should have taken into account, but I'll leave that out for this turn. And this was the density one. Because Custer's column is so concentrated, the Indians should have got another modifier here. Actually +2 to the dice. Well, actually, you know, it's only 2 combats. I think I can correct that. They had rolled a 6, so that will become an 8. So I'll have to do a morale check on Lieutenant Harrington. I'll roll for him and see what happens. Well, they rolled a 1, and even if they add Custer, that's a 4. They get a pin result, so we pinned the other company. Okay, so the Indians didn't do too bad with the fire. They disrupted one unit and pinned another. We'll go back to that fire phase for the cavalry. Now, since there's a bunch of attacks here for the cavalry, I'll just do all the attacks and then show you the final results, because there's just too many die rolls involved here and modifiers, and I'll give you the sum total after the cavalry have attacked. Okay, as I suspected, the cavalry didn't do too much against these 2 Indian units. It's because, first of all, they were halved, and they had to -1 because of the stack size, so they would have had to get pretty good results. Most of the time they were firing on table A. So that's the end of the fire phase there, and let me take a look at the melee phase. Okay, Custer figures that he has enough companies to melee Iron Bear and Inca Paduta, but they don't need to stick around. They can retreat before melee, but they will have to take opportunity fire. But feeling pretty lucky in that fire phase, they will do so. They'll take opportunity fire, retreat fire rather, and try to get the heck out. So I'll pick up the video after all of the cavalry units that are legal to do so fire at the retreating Indian units. Okay, that's the net result after the retreat fire. The cavalry did fairly well, actually. They were able to rout Iron Bear, and they disrupted Inca Paduta, who had to move 2 squares away and become disrupted. So that's the action after the 1540 turn. Well, like a Hollywood movie where the film breaks, I think we'll leave the action there. I just wanted to show you a little bit about what the game is like and how it plays. So, as we saw, Custer did his attack here, disrupted some units. The Indians are waking up, they're beginning to rally, and we probably have some kind of big battle here in the Valley of the Little Bighorn. Maybe Custer should have waited until Benteen comes up, I don't know. But I wanted to demonstrate how the combats work. I do mention the unwieldy stacks. They're a little hard to deal with, especially when you start to put pinned and disordered markers on them. But that's just the nature of the beast. It's a very fine game, and I think one of the best games on the Little Bighorn. It's going to take a little while to play this thing out. You get all these units involved, melees, multiple fires, retreats, disruptions. This game is going to take several hours to play, for sure. But a very fine game from Michael Taylor, and Volume 3 in the great Indian Wars of the American West. So that's it for the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and thank you for watching.